It was pouring the day my life flipped. Not the kind of romantic drizzle you see in movies. This rain hit like needles, soaking through my hoodie and into my bones. I stood outside our house, their house now clutching a duffel bag so wet it felt like it was made of lead. My hair was dripping, my shoes were ruined, and my pride, that was long gone. "You're a disgrace, Nico," Dad spat, standing on the porch like some pissed-off CEO, firing a lazy intern. "You walk out that door, you're nothing to us. No inheritance, no help. You're dead to this family." Mom was behind him, arms folded like a human judgment statue. Same face she wore when I told them I didn't want to join Delgado Holdings, their beloved family company. That was months ago. I thought maybe they'd come around. They didn't. "You want to build apps?" Mom sneered, like the word apps tasted sour. "After we spent years grooming you to run the business? Unbelievable. We gave you everything, and you throw it away for some startup fantasy?" I was 18, just finished high school. Most people were getting drunk at grad parties or planning gap years. Me? I was getting booted from my own life because I dared to dream differently. "If you leave now," Dad said, his voice suddenly ice, "don't ever come back." I adjusted the strap of my bag, stared him dead in the eyes, and said the most freeing word I've ever spoken. "Okay." For a split second, I think I broke them. They weren't expecting that. They expected me to cry, to beg, to fold like I always had. But I didn't. I turned around, walked down the long driveway, and didn't look back. Not when Dad shouted, "You'll regret this." Not when Mom slammed the door. Not even when the rain came down harder. That night, I crashed on my friend Eli's couch, which smelled like gym socks and takeout. Not ideal, but it beat sleeping outside. I had zero plans, even less money, and a very loud voice in my head screaming, "What the hell did you just do?" The first few months were brutal. I picked up 2 jobs stocking shelves at an electronics store during the day, delivering burritos at night. Slept maybe 4 hours a day. My social life vanished. My diet was 80% ramen, 20% vending machine trail mix. Eli's apartment became my base. A shoebox with peeling paint and a perpetually broken heater. But to me, it was freedom. I set up a corner with a beat-up laptop, a stack of programming books from the library, and a dream that refused to die. "You're nuts, man," Eli said one night, watching me code until sunrise. But like, the cool kind of nuts. He didn't get tech. He thought JavaScript was a drink. But he understood ambition. He knew what it was like to want more than the hand you were dealt. About 6 months in, something clicked. I built a tiny productivity app, nothing fancy, just a tool to help students organize their study schedules. I threw it on the App Store for fun. A week later, it had 800 downloads. A month later, 10,000. I started getting emails, feedback, requests. Then came the call. A local tech startup had seen the app. They weren't offering riches, but they wanted me to join as a junior dev. Flexible hours, room to grow. I could still work on my own projects. I said yes before they finished the sentence. My parents' company, Delgado Holdings, specialized in logistics warehousing, shipping, manufacturing. Old school, brick-and-mortar business. My grandfather built it from scratch, and Dad treated it like a religion. No room for new ideas. Definitely no room for someone like me who believed software could solve real-world problems. But I saw where the world was going: AI, automation, cloud solutions. I soaked up everything I could, attended free workshops, networked online, slept less, coded more. In 3 years, I jumped from junior dev to lead dev at a mid-sized tech firm. I launched my own platform, Taskline, an AI-driven project manager with smart deadlines and predictive alerts. It started catching on. Slowly at first, then like wildfire. I wasn't rich yet, but I was stable. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment that didn't smell like feet. I bought real furniture, a decent coffee machine. I even got health insurance, big win. Eli stuck around, always hyping me up like I was the next Steve Jobs. He eventually joined me full-time as head of operations when I turned Taskline into a full suite called Brightwave Solutions. We got our first VC offer within a year. First round, $8 million valuation. I nearly passed out. 6 months later, we hit $30 million. I moved into a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. Still drove my old Honda, though. Still coded until 3 a.m. Still answered every support ticket personally in the early days. And then it happened. One rainy Tuesday, I was reviewing possible acquisitions, smaller startups, legacy companies looking to modernize. And there it was, Delgado Holdings, my family's empire. Their stock had tanked. Revenues down. Old clients pulling out. They were hemorrhaging money, stuck in the past while the world moved forward without them. I pulled their quarterly reports. Brutal. A 55% decline in profits year over year. Layoffs. Lawsuits. I actually winced. And then, like a ghost, a name popped up on my phone. Dad. I hadn't heard his voice in 6 years, but I knew it instantly. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I answered, "Hello, Marcos," the first said, using his first name for the first time in my life. A long pause. "Leo," he started, and for once he didn't sound like the man who kicked me out. He sounded small. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my leather chair, stared at the screen filled with graphs of their downfall, and smiled just a little. "Yeah," I said. "I think we do." We agreed to meet the next morning. Not at some neutral cafe or office, but at Delgado Holdings' downtown headquarters. Same building I hadn't stepped foot in since I was 18 and soaked from the rain, dragging a duffel bag and a shattered dream behind me. This time, I showed up in a tailored navy suit and walked in like I owned the place. Because if things went how I expected I basically would, the receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. I didn't look like the scrappy teenager who used to trail behind Marcos Delgado, trying to look interested during board meetings. I didn't understand. I looked like someone who belonged in a corner office. "Mr. Delgado is expecting you in the top floor conference room," she said, voice a little unsure. "Great," I said with a smile. "Let's not keep him waiting." The elevator ride up was surreal. I used to daydream in that very elevator, wondering what my life would be like if I had the guts to walk away. Now I was walking back in not as a lost son, but as a potential buyer. As the doors slid open, I saw them. My father, still holding on to that corporate alpha male look-sharp suit, silver hair combed to perfection but now with visible cracks, hollow eyes, wrinkled forehead. Like life had been chipping away at him ever since I left. Next to him, my mother, stiff as ever, but clearly worn down. And then, surprise Lucian, my older brother. He looked nothing like the guy I remembered tan. Lean, always flashing a too-white smile at family functions. Now? Puffy-faced, bloated from too many dinners and too much scotch. He stood near the window, arms crossed like he was ready to throw hands. "Leo," my father said, forcing a polite nod. "Marcos," I replied, sitting across from them. "Let's get to it." I opened my laptop and projected Delgado Holdings' latest financials on the massive screen behind me. "This is what you called me about, right?" Lucian scoffed. "Cut the theatrics, Leo. You stalking our financials now?" I smiled. "It's called public information, Lucian. Anyone with an internet connection can see this mess." He bristled. My mom flinched. Marcos cleared his throat. "We've had setbacks." "Setbacks?" I raised an eyebrow. "You've lost 60% of your client base, laid off 2/3 of your logistics staff, and defaulted on 3 supplier contracts in the last quarter alone. That's not a setback. That's a slow funeral." My father's jaw tightened. "We need a short-term capital injection. $5 million would stabilize us while we modernize operations." I leaned back. Why now? Why not ask me 5 years ago when I started building Brightwave? "We didn't know," my mom said quietly. "Not until recently," Lucian cut in. "Let me guess. You want to play savior? Throw us a bone and gloat about it later?" I looked at him calm. "No, I want to acquire Delgado Holdings." Dead silence. Lucian exploded. "You want to buy the company? Are you out of your mind?" I looked right at him. "Your pride doesn't pay invoices, bro. Your company's worth less than my last seed round. I'm offering $25 million. That's more than fair." My father's lips parted, then shut. His eyes flicked to my mother. She looked down. He asked, "What would happen to us?" "You'll stay on temporarily." "Dad?" You'll serve as an advisor through the transition. Lucien, if you want to work under our operations lead, you can apply just like anyone else. Mom, you're good with people. We might use your network for client relations, but you won't have power anymore. That ship sailed when you told me to pack my bags in the rain. Lucien stepped forward, face red. This is revenge, isn't it? You've been planning this. I stood up slowly. No, I didn't plan for you to run the company into the ground. I was busy building something that worked. You did this to yourselves. My mom's voice broke. How long do we have to decide? Midnight, the first said, gathering my things. 12 hours. Leo, my father began. You can't expect us to. You gave me 5 minutes to accept your conditions the day you kicked me out, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I'm being generous. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and I want the deal signed with the same pen you used to reject my scholarship papers. You keep it in your desk drawer, right? His face went pale. I left them sitting in that cold, silent boardroom, staring at their options. Back at Brightwave HQ, Eli was waiting in my office, bouncing a stress ball off the wall. You look like you just wrestled a ghost, he said. 3 ghosts, I replied. Past, present, and extra bloated. He tossed me a cold brew. So, how bad is it? They're desperate. They'll fold. But it's not about that anymore. He gave me a look. Then what is it about? Closure. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there, sipping coffee and watching the city lights flicker like nervous hearts. At 11:45 p.m., I walked back into that conference room. They were all there. Marcos, my mom, Lucien. They looked like they hadn't slept. My father was holding a small leather case. The board approved it, he said, unanimously. I sat down without a word. He opened the case and pulled out the pen, the one with the old Delgado logo in gold. He set it in front of me, almost like an offering. I built this company for you, he said. I didn't know how to handle it when you walked away. You didn't build it for me, I said. You built it for a version of me you wanted. And when I didn't fit the mold, you threw me away. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. That admission hit harder than I expected. Lucien looked away, jaw clenched. You're getting your revenge. Happy now? I stared at him. Lucien, this isn't revenge. This is what happens when you stop listening to the future. The world moved on. You didn't. Then, slowly, one by one, they signed. Marcos went last. The tip of the pen hovered for a moment before he scribbled his name. When it was over, I stood and slid the contract into my briefcase. You really forgive us? My mother asked, eyes glistening. I paused. I forgave you the day I built my first app, because from that day on, I didn't need your approval. I just needed to believe in myself. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, Eli was waiting by the car. Well, he asked. It's done, I said, exhaling for the first time all day. Delgado Holdings is now a Brightwave division. He smiled. Full circle, huh? I nodded, looking up at the building that had once symbolized everything I wasn't allowed to be. Yeah. And this time, I'm not standing in the rain. The next morning hit different. I stood in the executive boardroom of what used to be Delgado Holdings. Now, it was Brightwave Logistics, our first full-scale merger. The plaque with the old name had already been removed from the wall. A small detail, but symbolic. Eli had it replaced with a digital screen displaying our logo in bright teal and white. Board meeting starts in 10, Eli said, handing me the updated agenda. We got HR, tech, and finance all lined up for the integration rollout. You want coffee? Make it double, I muttered, scanning the numbers. Brightwave had swallowed the failing legacy business whole. What was left was salvageable, but barely. Their systems were stuck in 2009. Their payroll processes still used paper forms. And don't even get me started on the internal server situation. We had a mountain to climb. But I had taken on worse. I was reviewing a particularly awful supplier contract when I noticed the time 8:58 a.m. Right on cue, the door creaked open. In walked Marcos. Same suit, less starch, less fire. He looked tired but strangely present. My mom trailed behind him, followed by Lucien, who was already rolling his eyes like we were filming a sitcom and I was the villain ruining his perfect little world. They took seats on the opposite side of the table. A new era, old faces. All right, I said, tapping my pen. Let's talk transition. Marcos spoke first, voice even. Before we get into the operational stuff, I think we owe you something. I raised an eyebrow. Lucian sighed. This is ridiculous, Luke. My mom interrupted gently. Just let us speak. I leaned back, curious now. Marcos looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't see control. I saw hesitation, humanity. You ever wonder why we pushed so hard? Why we tried to force Delgado Holdings on you? He asked quietly. Every day, I said. There was a beat of silence. It wasn't just about legacy, he continued. It was fear. I blinked. That was not what I expected. You were too much like him, my mother added, her voice trembling slightly. Too much like your grandfather. That stopped me. You mean Hugo? I asked, surprised. The one who built this company? My father nodded slowly. Yes, he was brilliant, a visionary, and utterly terrifying. He stood up and walked to the corner of the room, hands in his pockets like he was speaking to old ghosts. My father would leap before looking, took risks that nearly bankrupted us half a dozen times. He was always pushing, evolving, betting the farm on the next big thing. And it worked. Until it didn't. You mean when the market collapsed in a 96? I asked. He nodded again. That crash nearly killed us. I had to rebuild from scraps. And I promised myself I'd never gamble like that again. So you built a fortress, I said, connecting the dots. Stable, predictable, safe. Yes, he admitted. And then you came along with your code and your AI and your bold ideas, and it scared the hell out of me. My mother's eyes welled up. We didn't hate your dream, Leo. We hated how much it reminded us of the chaos we'd escaped. I sat with that. It didn't erase the pain, the rejection, or the years I spent proving myself without them. But it added a layer. One I hadn't expected. It wasn't right, my father said, kicking you out, cutting you off. We thought we were protecting you from failure, from yourself. But all we did was show you exactly who not to become. Lucian stared at the table, silent. And in that moment, something shifted. I didn't feel like a wounded kid anymore. I didn't feel like the rebellious outsider or the revenge-fueled CEO. I just felt free. Thank you, I said. That doesn't erase the past, but it helps. Marcos sat back down. We want to earn our place here, not expect it. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. The next few weeks were chaos, but the good kind. We brought in Brightwave's dev team to overhaul Delgado's tech infrastructure, Dart new servers, cloud integration, real-time inventory, tracking, automated logistics. The works. Eli led the ops transition like a general, sharp, fast, and just slightly too obsessed with color-coded spreadsheets. Lucian surprised me. He actually showed up, sat in on meetings, took notes, even apologized awkwardly, but still. And my parents? They stayed out of the way, mostly. Marcos gave strategic input when asked, but didn't meddle. My mom was surprisingly effective at reconnecting with old clients who thought the company had died completely. One night, around 11 p.m., I was still in the office, squinting at two versions of a new logistics dashboard, when Eli popped his head in. You planning to sleep here? Probably? Dude, he said, walking in. You remember that time you were living on my couch, using pizza boxes as a mouse pad? Vividly, I grinned. He sat on the edge of my desk, holding out a small manila envelope. What's that? Found it in the basement. Old Delgado HR files. Thought you might want to see something. Inside was a faded photograph. I recognized the kid right away, maybe 12 years old, standing next to Hugo Delgado in the original warehouse. I was wearing his oversized safety goggles, holding a clipboard like I had any idea what I was doing. He had one hand on my shoulder, smiling, beaming actually. I hadn't seen that photo in over a decade. He believed in you, Eli said. Yeah, I murmured. And now, I believe in me too. The rebrand launched 2 months later. Brightwave Logistics. Modern, efficient, sustainable. A perfect blend of tradition and innovation. We kept a small tribute to Hugo in the lobby, just a quote carved into the wall. Risk is the price of progress. Felt right. The media caught wind fast. Articles ran headlines like, "Disowned Son Saves Family Empire in $25 M Power Move." From pizza delivery to tech tycoon, Leo Delgado's full circle redemption. Even Reddit had a field day. Someone posted side-by-side photos of me from my startup days and now. The comments were brutal and hilarious. Yo, is this the glow-up of the century or what? Plot twist. Nepo baby goes full underdog and still wins. I wasn't in it for clout. But yeah, it felt damn good. Late one night, I found myself alone in the new office, staring out over the skyline. Marcos walked in quietly. No tie, no suit, just a hoodie and jeans. It was disorienting. "You've done something incredible here," he said. "So did Hugo," I replied. He nodded. "And I see now, you're not him. You're not me either. You're something different. Better." That hit harder than I expected. "Thank you," I said genuinely. "I hope," he added, "that one day you'll let us be part of the future, not just a relic of the past." I turned to him. "That's up to you. I used to think the hardest part of success was getting there. Turns out, it's staying there." 3 months after the rebrand, Brightwave Logistics was running smoother than anyone expected. We'd cut operational costs by 38%, landed 2 new major contracts, and expanded into a regional delivery partnership with a chain of eco-stores. Our dashboard tech alone had turned into a licensing product, bringing in more revenue than I could have predicted. Everything was growing fast. And when something grows that fast, it doesn't just attract attention, it attracts sharks. It started with a message from an unfamiliar contact. Simple, clean, "Heard you're making waves. We should talk D." Normally, I'd ignore a cryptic text from an unknown number, but something about the signature tugged at an old thread in my memory. I checked the full contact info. The sender's number matched someone I hadn't thought about in years, Damon Soria. Back in my early coding days, Damon had been one of the first people I tried to partner with. He ran a small cybersecurity firm at the time. Brilliant mind, terrible ethics. He tried to hijack one of my earliest prototypes, pitched it as his own at a tech pitch competition, and almost got away with it. I shut it down fast, quietly, cleanly, never saw him again. Until now. I showed the message to Eli. "That's not a friendly ping," he said, narrowing his eyes. "What do you want to do? Call the lawyers and double-check all our access points." Just in case. That week, strange things started happening. First, one of our warehouse servers glitched just for a few seconds, but long enough to delay a shipment and cost us a small contract. Then, one of our client pitch decks got leaked. Minor damage, but enough to piss off our sales director and create internal noise. And then, a recruiter we'd used before called me personally. "Hey Leo, strange thing, this guy Damon applied for a job here. Said he knew you." I leaned back in my chair. "Did he now?" "Yeah, sent in some weird presentation." It was mostly him trashing Brightwave's backend security. I exhaled slowly. "Thanks for the heads up. Don't contact him again. Already blocked." Click. Eli and I went into full lockdown mode. We hired an external firm to audit our systems, installed top-tier protection. Every employee went through cybersecurity training. I even paused the development of a new AI logistics feature just to make sure we had no leaks. It was exhausting. Paranoia didn't sleep. And while all of that was brewing, the family side of things wasn't exactly smooth sailing either. Lucien had been doing well, shockingly well, actually. He stopped showing up late, took feedback, led a successful trial launch in the Pacific Northwest. But there was something off. I'd catch him on the phone whispering, smiling in a way I didn't like. It reminded me of how he used to lie at family dinners with perfect ease, the kind of smile that came with secrets. One night, after a particularly long day, I found him in the break room, laughing over something on his phone. "Funny meme?" I asked, casually leaning against the doorframe. He jolted like he'd seen a ghost. "No, just, something about Elon. I didn't press." But I didn't forget. A week later, I got the email from an anonymous address. Subject line, "Bet you didn't see this coming." Attached was a forwarded pitch deck. It was Brightwave's AI routing module, our next big feature, the one we'd kept under wraps. Except this version had a different name, a new company logo, and a founder photo, Damon Soria, and Lucien. I sat there, stunned. Lucien, my brother, my own brother. I didn't call him. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't even tell Eli right away. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do over the years. Sit with it. Think it through. That night, I opened up an old Google Drive I hadn't touched in years, the one that held backups of every prototype I ever built. I searched through the archives, found the original code of the module, time-stamped, and fully documented. Then I called my lawyer. I have proof of intellectual property theft, 2 perpetrators. I want a cease and desist drafted and prepare a lawsuit. You sure about this? He asked. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Dead sure. The next morning, I walked into the conference room early. Lucien came in 10 minutes late, looking tired and slightly hungover. Rough night? I asked. He shrugged. Not really. Good, I said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. You're going to need a clear head for this. He opened it. His face changed instantly like ice water down his back. You went through my emails? Nope. Anonymous tip. But I didn't need much to connect the dots. He pushed the envelope back toward me. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like you stole proprietary code and tried to launch a competitor with a guy who already burned me once. He didn't say anything. I trusted you, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You had a second chance. A real one. And you blew it. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're the same guy you were 10 years ago. Just better dressed. He dropped his gaze. I stood up. Effective immediately. Your access is revoked. You'll receive a formal letter from our legal team. If you respond, it better be through your attorney. What about Mom and Dad? What about them? He swallowed hard. You're not going to tell them? I stared at him. They'll find out. But not from me. You can explain it. He left without another word. Later that night, my father called. I didn't pick up. Then my mother texted. Please tell me this isn't true. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. I just didn't have it in me. Some betrayals don't sting because they're surprising. They sting because they're so familiar. 2 days later, Eli and I were back in the office, going over the damage. Looks like the leak didn't go too far, he said, spinning his chair slowly. Their version's a half-baked clone. No real AI backbone, we're still ahead. I don't care about the competition, I said. I care about trust. He looked at me. You think your dad knew? No. He wouldn't have risked the company like that. Not now. Not after everything. We sat in silence for a bit, the hum of the city filling the space between us. Finally, Eli asked, You good? I thought about it. The kid who once got tossed out in the rain would have said no, would have spiraled, would have turned bitter. But I wasn't him anymore. I'm fine, I said. This was bound to happen eventually. And Lucien? He made his choice. Eli nodded slowly. So what now? I smiled. Now we build something even better. I used to think betrayal came with fireworks. A dramatic scream, a slamming door, a grand reveal in front of a crowd. But the real kind, the kind that cuts deepest, it comes in silence, in manila envelopes, in late-night texts you don't answer, because you're too tired to explain why trust isn't something you lend twice. After I shut Lucien out, the office felt colder, not in temperature, just in energy. Even Eli noticed. You've been quieter, he said one evening while reheating leftover dumplings. You okay? I'm good. He gave me a look. You're eating lunch at 7 p.m. Haven't left the office in 2 days, and your Spotify is stuck on piano playlists. You're not good, I smirked. You stalking my Spotify now? He didn't laugh. Look, Leo, what Lucien did sucked, but don't let it make you forget who you are. I nodded, even though I didn't fully believe it. Because if I was really the man I'd fought to become, why did it still feel like I'd lost something? The legal side wrapped up cleanly. Damon backed off as soon as our lawyers hit him with the cease and desist and proof of IP ownership. We didn't even have to take it to court. Lucien, he disappeared, deleted his socials, moved out of his place in the city. Last I heard, he was in Texas with some college buddy, trying to start fresh. He never responded to our legal notice, never apologized. And honestly, maybe that was for the best. But the fallout didn't stop with him. 3 weeks after the dust settled, I got a knock on my office door. It was my mom. Dressed down jeans, sneakers, windbreaker, no pearls, no perfect blowout, just a woman with tired eyes and a nervous half smile. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I hesitated, but then I nodded. "Yeah, come in." We sat across from each other, the skyline glowing behind her like a soft painting. She stared at the floor for a while before speaking. "Lucien told me everything," she said. I didn't respond. "I don't know why he did it," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think he knows why. He did it because he couldn't stand not being the favorite," I said. "He wasn't building anything. He just didn't want me to have it." She looked up, eyes glossy. "You really think we made you feel that way?" I didn't answer right away. Because yeah, I did. Growing up, Lucien got the praise, the protection, the benefit of the doubt. I got the expectations, the weight, the lectures. It wasn't always obvious, but it was always there. "I think," I said carefully, "you didn't realize how much you expected me to shrink so he could shine." She flinched. Not dramatically, just a twitch of the mouth, a blink too long. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not just for that, for all of it." I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I gave her a small nod, and then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. I recognized it instantly. My grandfather Hugo's cigar box. He used to keep notes in it, scribbles, ideas. "He left this to you," she said. I kept it. I don't know why. I opened it slowly. Inside were yellowed index cards with Hugo's handwriting, still as sharp and bold as I remembered. Each one was a quote. "If you're not scared, you're not dreaming big enough. Make the leap before the ground gives way." And the last one, on a card so faded I had to hold it to the light. "Sometimes the family you build means more than the one you're born into." I sat there for a long moment, staring at that line. "Thank you," I said quietly. She stood. "I know it'll take time, but I'd like to try again." I nodded. "One step at a time." She smiled. For the first time in years, it looked real. Eli and I spent the next few weeks laser-focused on a new goal, transforming Brightwave into a full ecosystem. Not just logistics, not just AI dashboards, but a complete platform that connected inventory, fulfillment, sustainability metrics, and smart routing into one seamless experience. We called it Pulse. I know, very startup why, but the name fit. It was the heartbeat of the entire system. Real-time data, real-time decisions. We launched the beta quietly with a few partners. It blew up. Within a month, we were fielding calls from 2 Fortune 500 companies asking for integration. Eli actually spit out his coffee when we got a LinkedIn message from the head of Amazon's supply chain team. "I guess you're officially on the map," he said. "I was always on the map," I grinned. They just couldn't see me before. We were gearing up for Series B funding when I got another unexpected call. Not from my parents, not from Lucien, from my old high school principal. "Leo, I don't know if you remember me." "I do, Principal Maynard." "Well, I'm reaching out because the school's looking to expand our computer science program. And, well, your name keeps coming up." I paused. "I was kind of a pain in your neck back then," I said. He chuckled. "You were persistent." "There's a difference." He went on to explain they were launching a tech incubator for students' hackathons, mentorship, all of it. They wanted me to help fund it, maybe even put my name on it. At first, I wasn't sure, but then I remembered being 15, building a chatbot in the library basement, hiding it behind a fake calculator app so no one would think I was weird. I remembered wishing anyone would take me seriously. So I said yes. We opened the Brightwave Innovation Lab that fall. First day, I walked in, and the place was buzzing. Rows of computers, VR kits, whiteboards full of scribbles that reminded me of my own notebooks. A kid couldn't have been older than 16 ran up to me, eyes wide. "Wait, you're the Leo Delgado?" I laughed. "That depends. Are you going to ask for my autograph or call me cringe? Can I show you my code?" "Better." Later that week, As I stood outside the school, watching students file in with laptops and dreams, my dad called. This time, I picked up. "Hey," I said. "Hey, silence." "I heard about the lab," he finally said. "Your grandfather would have been proud." I smiled. "Yeah, I think so too." Another pause. "I've been thinking about what you said, about rebuilding, earning our place, and I'd like to try." I didn't give him a speech, didn't make him grovel, didn't reopen old wounds. I just said, "Then show up." The next Monday, he did. Not in a suit, not with some grand proposal, just a cup of coffee, a notepad, and a willingness to learn. They say time heals everything. I don't buy that. Time doesn't heal. Time gives you distance, reflection, a choice. Healing? That's work. Daily. Quiet. Sometimes thankless. But worth it. It had been a year since I walked back into Delgado Holdings, now Brightwave Logistics, and flipped the script. 12 months since I turned a family legacy into a future-forward company. One full revolution around the sun. And somehow, everything still felt like it was just beginning. We closed our Series B round at a $120 million valuation. Pulse, our smart logistics ecosystem, had been adopted by 3 major retail brands. And more were lining up. Eli and I had stopped calling our growth insane because, at this point, it was just normal. Chaos was the new baseline. But the real wins? They weren't in numbers. They were in moments. Like the day my dad showed up to one of our brainstorming sessions, laptop open, hair slightly messy, asking questions instead of giving orders. Or the first time my mom organized a Brightwave networking event and introduced herself not as Delgado's wife, but as part of the team. Or the day I walked into the innovation lab at my old high school and saw one of the students demo a voice-activated delivery tracker and proudly say, "I got the idea from Leo's launch speech." Funny how the stuff that used to tear me apart, disapproval, exile, failure, had become the very fuel that built this version of me. One that didn't crave validation. One that created value. I got a message from Lucien around month 13. No apology, no excuses, just this: I messed up. I know that. I'm working on myself. I'm not asking for anything, just wanted to say congrats. You did what I never could. I stared at that message for a long time. Did I hate him? No, I just didn't trust him. But I respected the honesty. I didn't reply right away. I waited 2 weeks. Thought about it, then sent back, "Appreciate that. I hope you're doing the work. Take care." That was it. We haven't spoken since. But for the first time, I didn't carry the weight of it around like a brick in my chest. Sometimes closure isn't about conversations. Sometimes it's just peace. Late one evening, I was alone in the office. Not because I had to be, just because I wanted to be. There was something about the silence of a space you fought for that feels different, more sacred. The skyline stretched outside the windows, city lights blinking like they had secrets. I opened Hugo's old cigar box again. Still smelled like cedar and ink. There was one card I hadn't noticed before tucked behind the others. Written in his bold, slanted handwriting, "The people you build with are just as important as what you build." I smiled, looked around the room. Eli had become my brother in every way Lucien failed to be. My parents weren't perfect, but they were trying. And Brightwave? It wasn't just a company anymore. It was a community, a second chance machine, a living, breathing story made of every lesson, every scar. Our 5-year roadmap was ambitious: expand globally, launch real-time carbon tracking, build the first AI-optimized warehouse fleet. But we kept our culture simple: show up, speak honestly, build fearlessly. One Friday, as the office buzzed with pre-weekend energy, Eli pulled me aside. "I've been thinking," he said. "We should go back." "Back where?" "Your parents' place, the old house. The one you left in the rain." I blinked. "Why?" He shrugged. "Closure. Or just curiosity. I don't know. Don't you want to see it?" I hadn't thought about that driveway in a long time. That place had lived in my mind as a scene, not a real location. But maybe it was time to change that. So we went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Still pristine, still overly landscaped. But the power it used to hold over me was gone. Marcos opened the door, smiled. "Didn't think you'd ever come back." "Didn't think I'd want to," I replied. He stepped aside. "Come in. We toured the place like strangers. I pointed out the scratch on the banister I'd made as a kid. My mom showed me they still kept my old science trophies in the basement. And then we walked outside, onto the front steps. It wasn't raining, just warm air and fading daylight. You remember what I said that day? Marcos asked, hands in his pockets. I remember everything. I told you that if you walked away, you'd get nothing. I looked at him, and I did get nothing. At first. Then I built everything. He nodded, a faint smile in his eyes. Proud of you. Genuinely. I let the silence settle before answering. Thanks, Dad. It was the first time I'd called him that in years. A few weeks later, I gave a keynote at a global tech summit. My topic was rebuilding from rock bottom. I stood on stage, lights hot on my face, looking at a room full of investors, students, CEOs, people who thought success started with a good idea. They had no idea. I got kicked out of my home at 18 for refusing to follow the family path, I said into the mic. My first office was my best friend's couch. My first investor was a part-time job at a pizza place. My first victory? Not giving up. The crowd was dead silent, locked in, and I don't tell you this to sound impressive. I tell you because there's someone in this room, maybe a few of you, who've been told you're a failure, that you're wrong for wanting more, that your dreams are worthless. I've been there. I paused, scanning the room. They don't get to decide your worth. You do. And the minute you start building something, anything you take that power back. I closed with the line that had become my motto: success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Afterward, a student found me outside the venue. Nervous. Couldn't have been older than 19. Hey, do you think someone with no background in tech can still break into it? I'm teaching myself, but I feel so behind. I smiled. Behind who? He blinked. Everyone, he said quietly. Then stop trying to catch up, I said. Start building something. You'll find your pace. He nodded, wrote something down, said thank you 3 times. That's how I knew it mattered. These days, I still work late sometimes. Still scribble code in notebooks when no one's looking. Still visit the innovation lab twice a month, just to watch the next generation stumble into greatness. I haven't forgotten where I started. How could I? The rain, the bag, the door closing behind me. All of it shaped me, but I don't carry it as a wound anymore. Now, it's a foundation, and every morning I wake up, I get to build something new on top of it. Story 2, you'll be all right. You're going to the hospital by yourself? I'll send you straight to hell, I promise. I'm Lisa, and I'm 9 months along with my pregnancy. I'm giving birth for the first time. Therefore, even though I'm nervous, I feel really fortunate to have a new family member. David, my spouse, works as a white-collar worker and gets weekends off. He doesn't, however, provide much assistance with shopping or household chores. This is because, during the weekends, he typically returns to his parents' house. David has a close relationship with his in-laws, and because their house is close by, he spends practically every weekend there for no apparent reason. I've been cautious while carrying big items ever since I became pregnant. For example, while purchasing bulky goods like grains, comprehending buddies is frequently beneficial. I begin my day by getting up early, getting David's breakfast ready, and sending him off to work. I then do the washing and cleaning before going shopping if I need to. I begin preparing dinner as soon as I get home. I won't be able to unwind until I've completed these things. I started blogging every day as a new interest after taking maternity leave. I keep a journal with pictures I take of things like dinners. The sky is blue, the garden's blossoming flowers, among other things. These journaling sessions have become into little everyday pleasures for me, and many friends and acquaintances send comments. I was making supper one evening when my husband came home as usual. I cleaned them up and hung them on a coat hook after he sloppily put his jacket and bag on the couch. Welcome back. For supper, I prepared hamburgers. I said, I'm going to take a bath. With a harsh reply, he made a beeline for the restroom. Since we got married 3 years ago, he hasn't shown us any care or kindness. Though I've accepted it, I sometimes question whether this is really how a marriage should be. I gave David a drink when he came back in his pajamas. Where's the beer? He looked toward the bar and inquired, I apologize for forgetting to get it today. Tomorrow, I'll grab some, really? Now head over to the convenience shop? His expression instantly changed to one of obvious rage. I was annoyed. He asked his pregnant wife to do this, but why? Why don't you go get it yourself if you wanted it so badly? I find it difficult to move around because of my large belly. He became even more irate at that point and began to yell. It was you who neglected to purchase it. It is your responsibility to correct that error. Pregnancy does not entitle you to preferential treatment. For the sake of your health, my mother always emphasized the importance of staying active. I reluctantly made the decision to go to the convenience store because I knew that he was not easily calmed down when he was upset. When I got there, I ran into my neighbor Sarah. Sarah, oh, good night. Good night. Lisa, did you also forget to make a purchase? I came here because I ran out of options. Sarah's upbeat tone made me feel a little better. My husband insisted that I buy him beer because he truly wanted it. Why didn't he just go himself? That's what I said, but it didn't get through to him. It sounds like you're having a tough time, Lisa. After walking together for a bit, Sarah and I parted ways at a crossroad. When I returned home, David was lounging on the sofa watching TV. Having not even cleaned up after dinner. Why'd it take you so long? What were you dawdling around for? Give me the beer. David's disgruntled voice and his insensitive remarks made my heart ache. However, I handed him the beer without a word and began cleaning up after the meal. How could he say such things to me? Especially when I'm pregnant? I felt the urge to retort, but I didn't want another shouting match, so I remained silent afterward. I had my dinner, took a relaxing bath, and headed to the bedroom. The next morning, David acted as if nothing had happened. It seems he's the type to forget everything after a good night's sleep. However, I couldn't forget his words from the previous night, and I consciously ignored him. Why are you making that face so early in the morning? Don't take it out on me. I'm heading to work now, so be a bit considerate. You know the importance of appreciation, right? Due to what he said, I was filled with the urge to retort. That applies to you, doesn't it? But out of shock and disbelief, all I could do was sigh deeply and see him off. Be careful. Right. I won't eat dinner tonight. See you without any explanation. David left in a hurry. After seeing him off, I took care of household chores and went shopping as usual. However, since David mentioned he wouldn't be having dinner, I decided to prepare something simple just for myself. Then, as I was about to start my meal alone in the evening, I heard David's unexpected return and rushed to the entrance. I'm back. Thanks for your hard work. But you said you didn't need dinner today, right? Yeah, but my drinking party canceled. I'm hungry. You have something to eat, right? Well, I only prepared a meal for myself today. Upon hearing this, David's face contorted with anger. Didn't you even consider the possibility I might come back? This is unbelievable. Saying that, he moved to the dining table, and upon seeing the dinner I prepared, his mood worsened. What do you call this? A meal? I seriously question if you're properly doing your duties as a housewife. Don't waste the money I'm working for. I quickly prepared something for myself. Please don't get mad like this. Maybe you should learn proper cooking from my mom. Honestly, I've always found your cooking lacking again. He always compares me to his mother. Doesn't he realize how hurtful these comparisons can be? I can't eat this. Go buy something. Hearing this, my heart sank further. What does he think of me? It's already night and I've taken a bath. Can't you go buy it yourself? Forget it. You forgot to buy beer yesterday. Didn't prepare dinner today. It's so frustrating. I'm going back to my parents' place. David stormed out and left alone in the house. I strangely felt a sense of relief the next morning, as I expected. I received an angry call from David's mother. How can you not serve David a proper meal? This feels like moral harassment, if not worse. I explained what happened yesterday, but she wasn't accepting it, so I apologized and ended the call. After the call, my mood sank. Since David wasn't home, I decided to enjoy a leisurely late brunch. However, the prospect of David coming back tonight weighed on my thoughts. Considering yesterday's events, I decided to make tonight's meal memorable. I shopped with more care than usual, choosing out items and putting David's favorite beer to the cart. I was resolved to make a supper that would merit David's admiration. I cut my blog update time a little to dedicate more time to cooking. After investing adequate time to preparations, the table was set nicely, as if it was a special event. Looking at it, I got this sense of success and couldn't help but applaud myself. With this, he should undoubtedly be satisfied. I waited anxiously in the dining room for David to come home, But as time passed, there was no sign of him. I tried reaching him numerous times via my smartphone, but there was no answer, and I got increasingly nervous as the clock continued to tick. 1 hour. Then 2 hours passed, and I began to grow concerned. Did he potentially go to his parents' house? Thinking this, I contacted David's parents to verify, but they stated he hadn't come there either. I tried phoning David many times, but still there was no response. I was thinking about calling the police as midnight drew near when a dazed David came home. He was obviously intoxicated. I've returned home. Jacob. Concerned, I hurried to the entryway and discovered David sprawled on the hallway floor. What took place? Are you all right? Do you hear me? Loud, go out! Was met with an angry response from him. Then he stumbled over to the dining room. He violently shook off my hand as I attempted to hold him up. Keep your hands off me. Keep your hideous face away from me. To believe that you are my spouse. He spit out such comments while intoxicated and then simply collapsed there. Those were really stunning words. Why? Can he take other people's sentiments into account? His comments greatly wounded me, and I couldn't help but think that perhaps he no longer considered me family. My eyes filled with tears. I worked so hard to cook, yet it was all in vain. I ate supper by myself while feeling lonely after thinking that. David awoke the following morning as though nothing had occurred. I have a headache. I suppose my drinking is excessive. However, why did you abandon me in the corridor? David, you decided to lie down there. I'm not to blame. You're my wife, right? At least look after me when I'm intoxicated. After hearing David's remarks, I started to question why he constantly places the responsibility on me. You could have at least informed me if you weren't going to eat at home. I had made a nice dinner, and I gave you several calls. Then why didn't you respond? David answered casually. My previous day's drinking celebration was postponed for yesterday. Must I disclose everything? Additionally, you are aware of how difficult it is to answer the phone in a group setting. Every word David uttered, consider my predicament. My expectations of him decreased, and my heart grew colder. In this manner, I will never longer experience disappointment or hurt. I was thinking about taking a vacation and returning to my parents' house tomorrow. These days, it feels monotonous and uncomfortable to be around you. David's contemptuous attitude toward me made me think more and more about getting a divorce. My heart is pounding in anticipation of the impending birth of our child. Friends have told me of the agonies of childbirth, but my eagerness to meet the new life inside of me outweighs those worries. My attitude is lifted by the neighbors' frequent words of encouragement, such as, "It's just a little while longer." David came home shortly after and said, "Hey, want to go on a family trip?" He offered an unexpected recommendation. Really? However, I am referring about a family vacation. My parents are interested in joining. I was surprised. Why would parents suggest that David's parents and I had a relationship? Whenever there is a problem with David, they frequently point the finger at me, similar to the earlier phone conversation. But I had my doubts about the abrupt suggestion of a trip. David answered, "I'm going to give birth soon, and it might be a little risky to travel a long distance." Do I need to tell you this many times? Being pregnant does not necessarily indicate that you are ill. My parents had extended a kind invitation to us. However, what if anything does occur? Everything will be well. Everything has already been decided. Next week, we'll go for 3 days and 2 nights. What? My deadline is the next week. That's a little. Simply follow instructions. Get ready for the journey. The conversation is over. David just voiced his thoughts and walked out of the room. Now I'm in danger, I pondered. I discussed the scenario and asked a close friend for guidance the next day. That's a little too much, she remarked, worried. The day of the vacation unexpectedly arrived as I was considering how to turn down the invitation. To be honest, I don't feel good today. I'm going to relax at home since I'm scared about the baby. David didn't appear to be persuaded when I attempted to use it as an explanation. Anyway, you'll be all right if he simply takes a nap in the car. Bring the baggage, please. Hurry up, we're going to my folks' place. I was concerned and asked, "Is this really okay?" as we made our way to the car. I was sitting in the passenger seat, looking down, feeling warm at my feet after we had loaded our bags into the car. Water was spreading around them, I saw. Oh my water broke. I told David right away. My water may have just broken, David. Quickly take me to the hospital, please. David explained that he was surprised by the circumstances. Are you serious? Indeed. I mean it. We must now head to the hospital. While using a towel to wipe up the water in the car, the baby may be on the way. David opened the passenger door abruptly. What are you doing, David? We must visit the hospital. Leave now. The car is going to be a mess because of you. I was stunned. What do you say? Get out, I said. The car needs to be cleaned. Then I was yanked out of the car by David. David remarked, I can't believe this in this unbelievable situation. The plan was for us to go on a family vacation. Simply go alone to the hospital. I called out to David, but I was too shot to respond. Hold on, how could you abandon me in this state? He left me behind and drove off, feeling overpowered. I promptly phoned for an ambulance. When someone approached saying, Lisa, are you okay? It was Sarah looking apprehensive. Sarah instantly realized my dilemma and arranged me a private cab, soothing me throughout. Grateful for her kindness, tears rushed down my cheeks. Soon after, I safely arrived at the hospital, thanks to Sarah's help. On the way, she held my hand and cheered me up, staying at my side till I was transported to my room while being moved. I mean, a quiet vow. I'll hold him accountable, even as the agony of labor increased. Sarah continued to grip my hand. She also called my parents, who showed up at the hospital shortly after and were quite worried. I want to talk about something, Sarah murmured to them. Then the three walked out of the room. As the pangs of labor became more intense, from a corner of the room, my smartphone began to vibrate. Who is it? My parents gave me David's name in response to my question. Even though they were unhappy, I answered the phone. I heard a frantic David assist me as soon as I responded. But I was in no mood or position to talk to him, so I quickly hung up the phone. David kept sending texts even after my parents turned off my phone. I was eventually transferred to the delivery room as the labor became more intense. I waited through the agony for a while before I could hear my baby's cries. Weary, I was relieved to see Sarah and my parents standing in front of me grinning warmly. I slept with my eyes closed. I was lying in the hospital bed, rubbing my eyes, when I woke up from a few hours of sleep. I saw my parents seated beside me. Their expressions became worried. Are you all right? My mom asked politely. I'm still carrying the burden of fatigue. When my mother comforted my father, who was crying, I couldn't bring myself to sit up. She explained that the postpartum phase can be draining. As I watched this touching scene, a smile came to my face. How is the infant doing? I asked. My parents told me that the baby would soon return to the room after completing some tests. But I saw that Sarah wasn't there, answering the question I didn't ask. Sarah departed a little time ago, my mother said, reflecting on what may have happened if she hadn't been there. A feeling of appreciation settled over me. I made a pact with my parents that after being discharged, I would see Sarah to convey my thanks. Turning on my smartphone to alert my friends about the birth, I was confronted with an overwhelming amount of missed calls, largely from David. The sheer quantity left me temporarily shocked, but I had no hope or anticipation from his calls, so I closed the notifications without hesitation. One of my friends visited the hospital room to congratulate me on the delivery. As she celebrated and offered her sincere wishes, I spoke out about the recent happenings with David. After hearing the account, she reacted both amazement and fury, partly playfully suggesting she'd want to punish him a bit. But she also underlined that my health and rest were vital, chatted with me for a bit, and then left my parents fully briefed by Sarah on the whole affair. Asked, "What are you intending to do next?" I revealed my feelings about my relationship with David and informed my folks I'm considering divorce. They supported my choice and extended their assistance upon my release. I intended to stay at my parents' house where they had prepared a room for me. Meanwhile, David seems to have visited the hospital, but as I had informed the medical officials that I didn't desire to see him, he wasn't let in. Sarah brought a basket of fruit to my hospital room the next day. "Sarah, you arrived!" I cried out with joy. "You appear to be recuperating nicely, but be careful not to push yourself too much." She suggested that postpartum exhaustion might be really severe, finding solace in Sarah's remarks. I let out a sigh of relief. I took the basket of fruit from her. "I really appreciate you assisting me, Sarah. Without you, I'm not sure what would have occurred." I bowed deeply and conveyed my sincere thanks. The most important thing is that you and the baby are both healthy, Sarah said with a gentle giggle. All I want is a little hand. In any case, I will always be appreciative. I'll come over and properly thank you once everything has calmed down, Sarah responded with a hearty chuckle. I have discussed what transpired with my hubby, you know. Her statements appeared to infuriate him. I might infer David's predicament to some extent. I said, I really apologize for bringing you into this mess, Sarah. Do not be concerned. Remind yourself of the people who made it possible for you to work at your present employer. It's really difficult to forgive this act. Sarah's voice took on a harsh tone that I had never heard before. In reality, Sarah was the spouse of the CEO of the business where my husband was employed. I was unaware of this fact when we originally relocated to this residential area, but as we kept running into each other at the neighborhood grocery stores and sometimes at convenience stores, we grew closer over time. We even started having tea together, and it was during these times that I discovered the nature of her husband's work. My husband, however, had no knowledge of this background at all. This was because he didn't want to socialize with our neighbors and didn't even join me for our first neighborhood greetings. I don't want to cause any difficulty, so don't tell your spouse, Sarah had softly advised me before. I had also complied with that request. Sarah had repeatedly urged that I speak with my husband about my pregnancy and the fact that I was still having to put up with his irrational behavior. But I had always said no since I didn't want to bother her. However, this latest event, maybe even Sarah had had enough. My husband kept phoning Sarah because of this. You have my sincere gratitude for everything. I became aware of how lucky I was to have someone who would go to such extent for me after hearing Sarah's forceful statements. I couldn't contain my tears when I saw my response. Sarah smiled warmly at me again. I consider you a close friend, Lisa. I can't just stand by and watch when something like this happens to a friend. Our chat was filled with sincere smiles. However, my husband's texts didn't cease. Despite the bombardment of alerts online, I purposely disregarded them all. My thoughts were clear as I considered the divorce, and my only concern was how I would spend the rest of my life with my child. A close friend came to my bedside as I was getting ready to leave the hospital, gave me her smartphone, and said, I want you to see this. A post that had gained a lot of attention on a particular social networking site was visible on her phone. She told me she had commented on social media about my husband's recent behavior when I questioned what it was about. With a huge following on social media, my friend was a major influence. She got a response to one of her postings one day. By happenstance, the follower who responded had recorded the moment my husband shouted at me after escorting me out of the car. In an effort to preserve my anonymity, the follower obscured my face in the video and posted it online with my friend's consent. Personal information about my husband and even his business was discovered as a result of the video spreading like wildfire. My spouse appears to be receiving a lot of negative feedback on the internet right now. What? I was unaware that things had become this bad, my companion said. Well, they brought it upon themselves, didn't they? With a soft smile. My spouse made decisions that led to the things he did and the outcomes. Furthermore, my husband allegedly excused himself from the situation when one of his friends asked him about it, stating that he had little option due to the remark because he had a prior trip commitment with his parents that day. Online criticism started to come not just from my husband, but also from his parents. Even the area around my in-laws' house was affected by the news, and it appears that a number of subjects pertaining to my husband's parents are trending on social media. When I looked at the screen, my phone began to ring. It was my mother-in-law who called. For my mother-in-law, that is, my companion. I made an interesting suggestion while looking at my phone screen. How about you pick her up and tell her what's on your mind? But I chose to ignore it since I was so tired that I didn't feel like saying anything. Before I knew it, my husband's, father-in-law's, and mother-in-law's names were all over the missed calls list. Since social media brought attention to the issue, even the medical personnel appeared to understand my predicament and began to provide sincere support. As my discharge date drew near, the medical personnel refused to let me speak to my spouse or in-laws, regardless of whether they visited or called several times. One urgent concern of me was if my spouse and in-laws were hiding outside the hospital. Despite my parents' assurances that I shouldn't worry, I became frightened at the prospect of my darling child being in danger. On the day of my discharge, though, that worry was promptly allayed when my parents assisted me with my possessions. My husband's voice yelled, "Lisa!" My in-laws' loud shouts came next. I was suddenly encircled by men in black suits who formed a barrier of protection. I was trying to make sense of what was going on. "Don't worry, we're here on Sir's request to protect you," one of the men stated as he walked over to me and carefully opened the car door. As my mother remarked with a smile, it appeared that my parents already knew this. "I told you there was nothing to be concerned about, didn't I?" I felt comforted and climbed into the car with ease, believing what she had said. In the meantime, my husband and in-laws were unable to approach because they were so intimidated by the bodyguards. There are no adequate words to describe my gratitude for Sarah's help, such like this. All I could think about was how I might repay Sarah for her generosity. In agreement, my parents said that we needed to figure out how to express our appreciation to Sarah. Despite the start of my new existence, the days were easy and enjoyable. My spouse and in-laws never stopped contacting me. There was not even a shred of approval when I mailed them the divorce papers. My in-laws called our house one day. My father apparently responded, and they spoke to him as though she had joined our family. Therefore, she should not complain about how she has been handled. It appears that they were caught aback by my father's vehement response to their remark and promptly hung up. I resolved to visit a lawyer after talking with my parents about how to handle this and deciding that getting expert help was the best line of action. My father, who happened to know a lawyer, kindly offered to assist once we described our predicament. I described previous incidents and told the lawyer about the video that was making the rounds on social media. My spouse was surprised at first when the attorney contacted us, but he eventually turned defiant. "We'll handle marital problems on our own." He made the argument in a smooth voice. "We don't need a lawyer." Nonetheless, the attorney responded coolly and carried out Lisa's request. "Please address any future correspondence to me. Lisa, my client, is in charge of determining whether or not she wants to consult with a lawyer." However, my spouse was speechless and at first refused to get a divorce. When mediation and the possibility of a court case were suggested, the word court seemed to shake him, and he reluctantly agreed to the divorce. "I have no interest in the child and have no plan of seeing them in the future. Therefore, I don't see why I should pay child support. As for property distribution, I did nothing wrong," he claimed irrationally. The lawyer carefully explained from a legal standpoint, but my husband still looked doubtful. "If so, it appears that we will cross paths in court." My in-laws, who were listening close, were alarmed and instantly agreed with the lawyer's suggestion. I was surprised that I had ever married a man like him when the lawyer told me this. Sarah and I had been in contact ever since I got back to my parents' house, and when I informed her about what had happened, she enthusiastically and jokingly proposed that we take your ex-husband's retirement money. Isn't garnishment one way? Feeling in awe of Sarah's intelligence. After some time, the lawyer called me and informed me that my husband wanted a satisfactory resolution and wanted to apologize in person. I consented to talk on the phone while the attorney watched. When the day of the planned call finally came, my parents and the attorney on the other end of the line were with me. "I finally heard you respond. I'll forgive you if you apologize now. So return home. Let's be a pair again. The home is a disaster. Everyone is staring at me with disdain, and I could lose my job. You are to blame for all of this. Thus, assume accountability." He kept hurling charges at me without feeling overpowered. See? I carefully decided how to respond to his words. "You're unable to respond appropriately? She really is a lady without any redeeming traits." I eventually reacted. "This chat is being recorded, just so you know. I'll retain it as proof. Farewell." My husband's shockwave was audible in his voice. "Did you record it? Surely that's unfair." "I was kidding. I apologize. Without you, I couldn't survive. Let's begin again. We truly loved each other, right?" I swear that going forward, I'll put in more effort. With the recorded data in hand, I hung up the phone as soon as I heard those words. "Can you use this audio as evidence?" I asked the lawyer after handing it to him. "He really is an incorrigible man," the lawyer said, shaking his head incredulously. Like me, my parents have made the tough decision to cut off contact with him. Their reaction to his actions was one of surprise and disappointment, rather than rage. I came to the realization that I was kind of like this drama. The divorce process with my husband went well, and I clung to the tiny, naughty side that surfaced. The unrest started to fade as the arrangements for child support and property division proceeded smoothly. My ex-husband was penalized right away because of the information Sarah gave her husband, who was the president of his business. The president, who was well known for his family-oriented principles, thought that the firm couldn't trust a worker who couldn't safeguard his family. After losing his work and being unable to pay his housing loan, David went back to living with his parents. The viral video damaged his image, and he had trouble finding steady work, barely making ends meet with part-time, temporary gigs. His parents were also the subject of rumors, and serious friends in the area claimed that they appeared to be always uneasy. Surprisingly, I thought that this ostracization would be more difficult for them than any legal consequences, because of the harsh social criticism they encountered, which went beyond my expectations. With most problems handled and my health healing, my parents, my kid and I visited Sarah's house to convey our thanks. We felt warm and welcome since Sarah and her husband showed real happiness and showered my baby with affection. After that, Sarah and my mother became good friends. Similarly, Sarah's husband and my father got along quite well and our families grew close. In addition, the son of Sarah and her husband was about my age, and to everyone's surprise, our relationship started to take a surprising turn. Nobody could have ever imagined that a few years later, I might turn out to be a member of her family. There are a lot of surprises in life.